All right, welcome to the 2019 session wrap-up for our non-public schools. I'm Luke McNamee, the Policy Director from the Institute for Quality Education. So we're just going to run down kind of an overview of the major initiatives that the General Assembly passed that are most interesting to non-public schools. Just some kind of bill statistics. There were 1,349 total bills filed, 293 of which passed. There were 710 filed in the House, 639 in the Senate. We always find it interesting that the Senate tends to file around the same number or more bills than the House, even though they have about half as many members. So ultimately, education-related bills, there were 198 filed, only 45 of them passed. Roughly around 100 in each chamber were filed. 27 in the House, 18 in the Senate passed. So we'll kind of touch on the couple of topics. Broadly speaking, the bills of most interest to you guys dealt with state budget and funding, school safety, kind of the overall governance structure of education, and CTE, and workforce development. We have a couple other interesting ones there towards the end that we'll touch on as well. So kind of do a quick overview of House Enrolled Act 1001, the biennial budget. Overall, the legislature appropriated $763 million new dollars for K-12 education. We were really excited to get this number with the budget needs of DCS and the ever increasing cost of Medicaid. $763 million was a lot more money than we thought we would get. So it's definitely something to celebrate. That money, kind of break down, where that's going into the various pots. So it increases overall K-12 tuition support by $539 million over the biennium. So that's a 2.5% increase. Now that money and how it goes into the foundation amount, that next bullet point there, increasing that from $5,300 to $5,500 in 2020 and $5,700 in 2021. That impacts the voucher amount. So the increases there are, while you won't see that full $5,300 to $5,700 jump, that will increase the overall voucher amount that you guys are able to access. So some of these other provisions, again, they're not going to apply to you guys necessarily, but just so that you're kind of aware, you may have heard some information about the complexity funding. There were some schools that took a big drop in overall funding, and that's just based on the way that the complexity is calculated. So the legislature did bump that number up from 3,500 to 3,600 over the next 2 years, and they kind of put indexed it to kind of limit the drop that some schools are seeing. So let's see, something of interest to you guys. House Enrolled Act 1001 returns school funding to fall and spring count dates. For traditional public schools, that means, on the September 13 and February 3rd count dates, the money will follow the kid for what their enrollments are on those respective days. For non-public schools, choice schools in particular, it's going to create a second voucher window. But I think we're still waiting to hear from DOE just how that's going to roll out. Caitlin, Bell, and I are going to meet with them here soon, so we should hopefully know more in the next couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for some guidance from them or from emails from us with some more information. Additionally, specific to you guys, the Choice Scholarship Program, we were able to work with our friends over in the legislature to add a third tier to the Choice Scholarship Program for those families that fall within 100 to 125% of free and reduced lunch. Previously we just had that 90 and the 50% voucher. So now we have a middle ground 70% voucher. We heard that there were some families on that 50% voucher that that voucher amount helped, but it didn't quite get them there, or they had multiple children. So hopefully that 70% amount will kind of help bridge the gap for some folks who are maybe on the bubble of being able to participate in the program. And like I had mentioned before, there we have that second voucher application window. So we'll have more information, roll out there. But generally it'll fall in that November 1, January 15th timeframe. We also were able to get some increases in the tax credit scholarship cap. So currently it's at $14 million. So for fiscal year 2020, we'll bump it up to 15, and fiscal year 2021, 16.5 million. So the budget also kind of fixed the kindergarten cutoff date that they passed a few years ago. Essentially said that, if you weren't 5 years old by August 1st, then you couldn't enroll in school. Well, they've kind of relaxed that a little bit and said, if a child is 4 years old at the beginning of school, but they turn 5 before September 1 in 2019-20, or October 1 in 2020-2021, that those kids can still enroll in school. So for you guys in particular, the Choice Scholarship and Tax Credit Scholarship eligibility requirements will still require that student to be 5 years or 5 years old on August 1. So that change does not impact you guys. Those kids have to be 5 by August 1st. So kind of moving into the school safety bucket, given the national focus on school shootings, the couple here that have kind of occurred in Indiana, in Richmond, and in Noblesville, as well as the recent charter school shooting in Denver. School safety is a top priority for the legislature. So they have a handful of bills that deal with specifically with the school hardening, some additional grant dollars, as well as kind of mental health services. So House Enrolled Act 1004 was kind of one of the school hardening bills. So the budget appropriated an additional $5 million to the Secured Schools Fund, bringing that up to $19 million. You guys still have access to those funds. And so the new House Bill 1004, House Enrolled Act 1004, allows or expands the things that those matching grants can be used for, such as school resource officers, allowing you to conduct a threat assessment. It does require schools who try to access that grant. You have to conduct an active shooter training annually, as well as creates kind of a tiered match for those grants to allow smaller schools to have access. The fear was that a large traditional public school district would come in, or a handful of them would come in and use up all the dollars. So if you look here in these two charts we've got, or tables we've got here, it kind of gives you an idea of how that will work. So I imagine for most of you, you're going to fall in that 1 to 1,000 student range. The maximum award amount that you can go for is $35,000. If you have 500 or fewer students, you only have to match 25% of whatever you request. You do have the option to kind of partner up with a couple of schools and go for a larger amount. You can see down there you can apply for up to 100,000, but you do have to match whatever amount you go for, up to 100%. Senate Enrolled Act 325, school security grants and advances. So this will allow you guys to access grants from that Secured School Fund to create like a student parent support services plan. A lot of the consternation during session was from some parent organizations and some other groups that were afraid that schools were going to start unilaterally providing these mental health support services without input from the parents. And so, Senate Enrolled Act 325 ultimately included kind of cleaned up a number of other bills that dealt with mental health and came up with something that everybody could kind of agree on and get behind. So essentially, if a school sees that there's maybe a kid that needs some services, that they work closely with a parent to develop whatever services that may be, or those may be those in school or with a community partner. The bill also requests a summer study for the Education Committee to look into trauma-informed care approaches in schools, as well as what kind of partnerships are available in communities to help kind of create a robust system of care for students. Handful of other school safety bills here. Senate Enrolled Act 2, school bus safety, will only apply to those schools that do that bus kids. So if you offer those transportation services, this will something you need to look into. So essentially, it will increase fines and penalties for people who pass buses when the stop arm is extended. It also prohibits loading and unloading buses at a location that requires students to cross U.S. routes or state roads unless there are no other safe alternatives. So that provision there in the next bullet point that requires annual review of bus routes, essentially just making sure that your bus routes are safe and as safe as they could be. given the recent incident up in Rochester with those few students that were killed. House Enrolled Act 1225, Safe Schools. It allows you guys, in partnership with the county sheriffs, to apply for grants to implement an active event warning system. So it's just sort of a robust communication system between like the county sheriffs, emergency response folks, school officials. You know, in the event that there's something going on in your school, it's kind of a one-stop shop for communication. And I believe that there's like a closed CCTV sort of aspect to it, where the sheriff will have access to the school cameras if you have them, and basically just trying to create a more streamlined, robust system for response in the event that there's an incident. House Enrolled Act 1398, information concerning threats to school safety, basically encourages schools and law enforcement to share criminal and investigatory records, school incident records with each other. The author of the bill is a former superintendent in Hamilton County, Representative Tony Cook, who, when discussing the bill on the floor, cited a story where he had a student who assaulted a female student over the weekend, and police were involved. Then on Monday morning, the two students were sitting in math class together. And so the idea of that bill is to make sure that those sorts of things don't happen. Make sure that there's better communication between local law enforcement and school officials. House Enrolled Act 1209, discipline of coaches, requires DOE, IHSAA, and schools to communicate and share any appropriate issues or charges against coaches to make sure that folks that probably shouldn't be coaching students aren't. So it's just kind of a way to streamline communication and make sure that we have safe coaches in schools. So another push with the legislature in recent years, with the implementation of graduation pathways, we're kind of looking at overall, like, how does our education governance system work? Is it streamlined? Are there efficiencies we could find? So the whole idea is to make sure that we're best using all of our educational resources to deliver the best outcome. So kind of along that line, House Enrolled Act 1005, with the appointed superintendent. It requires the governor to appoint a Secretary of Education beginning in January 2021. This was already current law, but instead of 2021, it was 2025. Once Superintendent McCormick announced that she wasn't interested in running anymore, or running again at the end of her term, the General Assembly just decided to bump that date up to 2021. The idea being that the governor will have more, authority to streamline and bring the Department of Education kind of in alignment with the other work of like the governor's workforce cabinet and the state board and the Commission for Higher Education. So along those lines, Senate Enrolled Act 546 urges this Education Summer Study Committee to study integrating the membership and responsibilities of the state board, of the governor's workforce cabinet, and CHE, just to make sure that make sure all the lines of communication are effective, make sure that there aren't any duplicative responsibilities, find ways that we can streamline and improve operations. House Enrolled Act 1002 was specific to career technical education. So the whole idea with graduation pathways requiring a lot more CTE from schools to provide as much flexibility as we could. To fulfill those obligations. So it includes a lot more than what we have on the screen here, but we pulled these out as what we thought would be the most relevant. So it allows high schools to count approved work-based learning or CTE courses, programs, or experiences as satisfying Indiana Diploma with Academic Honors designation requirements. The idea was not to preclude academic honors students from pursuing relevant CTE courses. It allows schools to employ non-licensed instructors to teach up to 50% of CTE courses offered by the school. And finally, provides CTE course approval flexibility if the course is being taught in partnership with an employer or an employer and a third-party trainer or a post-secondary educational institution. There's also a bill floating around, House Bill 1404, that made it through the House. but ended up being stalled in the Senate, that it talks about aligning the accountability system to the new graduation pathways requirements. Just kind of break down there with what schools are going to be expected to do and the way the current accountability system works. There are a number of folks that were really excited about the prospect of looking at, how a kid is doing after they graduate in terms, of determining accountability. There were some folks who weren't all that excited about it. So House Bill 1404 stalled in the Senate, like I said, but a kind of House Bill 1002 creates a panel to look at the recommendations that were kind of made in 1404 to look at, okay, so if we do want to move to an outcomes-based accountability system, looking at, are kids employed? Are they enrolled in a post-secondary institution? Are they seeking a workforce credential? Are they in the military? Those types of things. To what extent, we could factor that into our accountability system. So there's going to be a panel under oversight of the state board. It's going to be similar to that graduation pathways panel. And so they should have some recommendations out on October 30th. They have to have them out by October 30th. So we'll update you guys on those as they kind of move through the process. Finally, House Enrollment Act 1002 requires the state board to adopt and implement a nationally administered teacher licensure exam. There was some criticism during session of the current exam, which is customized to Indiana. There was some folks questioned the validity of some of the content area exams due to the low pass rates and the lack of study materials. So I believe it was in Senate Bill 532 originally. I'd have to go back and double check, but it ended up in House Enrolled Act 1002. So House Enrolled Act 1629 also prohibits CTE centers operated by traditional public schools from barring admission to charter and non-public school students. We heard of at least one instance down in Knox County of one of those school corporations adopting a resolution that basically said, like, we will not accept any non-traditional public student. Given the new CTE requirements and the whole idea of giving you guys flexibility to deliver those, we felt it necessary to prohibit those schools from doing that. So if you guys are ready and willing to send your kids there and willing to pay for it, like, they shouldn't be able to prohibit you from attending. So just a couple other bills of interest this session. There's the House Enrolled Act 1641, which applies, it's charter school matters, applies almost exclusively to them, but just so that you're kind of aware of the changes there. There's the streamlines the unused school building law. So this is the one that allows a charter school to lease or purchase a building for $1. It does have a carve out for schools larger than 200,000 square feet. But the part of this bill that's of interest to you guys, if no charter school lays claim to the building, non-public schools, accredited non-public schools, are allowed the right of second refusal. To purchase one of those unused buildings. So you would express interest in the building, no charter school's interested. At that point, you would be eligible to purchase it at a fair market value or a price that negotiated between yourselves and the traditional school corp that's trying to do away with the building. So that gives you guys some opportunity there. Senate Enrolled Act 132 is the civics requirement. The bill as filed would have required the U.S. citizenship test to be administered like as a condition of graduation, but the final version of the bill just requires it be administered as part of the U.S. government curriculum, and it also requires an enhanced study of the Holocaust in U.S. history course. And both of these, to some extent, were already kind of part of the curriculum. This bill just restates that. So nothing totally new. On the civics test, I believe that there are tons of study materials available online for free. So if you aren't already administering it or something similar, there are resources out there that you can get a hold of at no cost. Senate Enrolled Act 567 is virtual education matters, mostly deals with virtual charters and virtual education programs in traditional public schools. There's been a lot of criticism of some of the bad actors in the virtual space. So the legislature took some recommendations that the state board made and kind of built a regulatory framework to make sure that they have some oversight. So kind of the big provision there, one of the big provisions there requires a mandatory onboarding process for parents and students prior to enrollment. Virtual education requires some buy-in from parents obviously from the students. So the idea is to make sure that the parents and students have a really good idea of what they're getting into before they just enroll in a virtual school. House Enrolled Act 1629 is one of several various education matters bills. Kind of the most important provision that we want to highlight there is that it requires DOE to make every reasonable effort to provide voice-to-text accommodations on the iLearn. There was some criticism this year from members in the General Assembly. Apparently, the department, in negotiating its contract for iLearn, elected to not provide those voice-to-text accommodations that it previously did on the iStep. And so this would have an impact on, for example, students with dyslexia who have difficult time, difficult time reading, and given that these assessments are, timed, it would, significantly impact their ability to complete the test. So it also requires the state board to report to the General Assembly summarizing how students' IEPs were altered to align with the iLearn accommodations, and whether or not offering those voice-to-text accommodations would impact proper measurement of students' reading comprehension. So a couple more here. House Enrolled Act 1400 is sort of a dereg bill that builds upon the work from a bill from a few years ago. Essentially takes all of the education requirements, curricular mandates, training mandates, teacher licensure, all of that sort of stuff, and creates a 4-year kind of rolling study to look at, okay, what do we still need? What applies to what school types? Do we need to still have these sorts of things? So that'll be an ongoing process that we'll be paying close attention to. If any of you guys want to be a part of that or have suggestions of, for things that you're required of you that you don't really understand why, or if you have duplicative requirements, let us know so that we can make sure to bring that to the committee's attention. Finally, and this is probably our biggest disappointment of the session and something that we're definitely going to have to fix next year, House Bill 1640, school accreditation, would replace that freeway accreditation that many schools use to access the Choice Scholarship Program with a performance-based accreditation system aligned to the current accountability system. So that freeway accreditation is more than 20 years old. It's not aligned to the current accountability system. I think only a handful of schools that are using it actually meet the standards because they are so outdated. So since House Bill 1640 did not pass, there are a handful of schools who haven't already applied for freeway waivers, which are, were allowed when the legislature decided to sunset freeway. So those of you whose freeway contracts are kind of coming due, you need to make sure you're applying for those waivers to get the extra time while they implement that new system. So again, we'll work on that next year to get that new program in place. Ultimately, the bill died because Senator Lysing's infamous cursive writing mandate was amended in the bill, which rather than require all schools to do cursive writing, Representative Banning, who was the author of the bill, decided to just let the bill die. Finally, one of the smaller but important provisions in the bill included a fix to there's a child and sex abuse training that is required to be, quote, research and evidence-based. But there's not really a definition for what research and evidence-based is in law. So it came to our attention that I think IMPD was conducting this training for a lot of schools, and since it has to be research and evidence-based, and their training is not, their legal counsel advised them that they can no longer offer the training. So that's a fix that needs to be done as well, something we'll be working on next year. Some of you may be familiar with our bill tracking list. For those of you who aren't, if you just click that link there, it will take you to all the bills we've flagged as of interest to private schools. The list only includes those bills that passed, so you, for example, won't see House Bill 1640 on the list. If there are bills that you'd heard about, like 1640 or 1404, that accountability bill, that you're interested in and want some more information about, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to point you in the right direction or give you some resources. For those of you who aren't already signed up for Dr. McCormick's weekly updates, I would encourage you to do so. You can sign up on the DOE website. If you have trouble, just reach out to us. We're happy to help you. But if you click this link here, that'll take you directly to the legislative guidance page. So for all those bills that we went over and for different bills that were passed, this year, DOE will start putting out guidance for schools. I'm sure most of you are familiar with legislative guidance generally, but just make sure you're checking that link every now and again as things start to roll out. I believe House Enrolled Act 1209, the discipline of coaches, I believe that guidance is already up, as well as a handful of others. So finally, I just want to say thank you for all your participation in the Action Center this year. We sent out a bunch of alerts, hey, help us support this, or, let the legislature know that we're opposed to, XYZ issue. And you guys are really great. We got a ton of emails, a ton of actions. So thank you for that. We are now trying to push out some thank yous to the legislators for those, folks who really stepped up to the plate and helped us get our school choice programs and stuff that benefits the non-public schools into law this year. So if you haven't already, please take one more opportunity, hop on our Action Center, send a quick thank you, share this link with your parents and with your teachers, have them hop on. It's very quick. We have a pre-populated message in there that's just thanking them for their hard work. You just kind of input your name and fire it off. So unless anybody has any questions, we'll go ahead and close. As always, you guys can reach out to us via email. Happy to answer any questions or go over anything that you might need more information on. So thank you.